Kefir can be fantastic for your complexion, and if you're not drinking it, your skin is probably missing out. In this video, we're going to cover why kefir is great for your skin, especially if you have concerns like acne or eczema or dry skin. We're also going to talk through how you can make it at home, plus we'll cover some tips on making sure you can find a good store-bought version. So a quick hello if you're new here. My name is Fiona. I'm a registered nutritionist with a master's degree in nutritional medicine. On this channel, we talk about nutritional skincare, which is the concept that the food that you eat can be an easy and effective part of your skincare routine. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button to make sure you're the first to get all the latest science-backed tips. If you're watching this, you probably know what kefir is, but just to recap, kefir is fermented milk. It's thinner than yogurt, but it has way more friendly bacteria, so it's kind of like yogurt's overachieving cousin. Traditional kefir is made by fermenting milk with kefir grains. Now these look a little bit like cottage cheese, but what they actually are is communities of bacteria and yeast covered by a kind of a soft shell. So these grains are an alive thing. Now I'm aware that fermented milk sounds disgusting, but it's not. It's weirdly refreshing, and actually once you get into the habit of drinking it, it's also weirdly addicting. So what does kefir do for your skin? The short answer is quite a lot. The longer answer is kefir can be really helpful if you have acne, eczema, or a tendency towards dry skin. So let's look at each of those in turn. Kefir and acne. So one study showed that when people drank kefir daily for 12 weeks, a third of their acne disappeared. And we have other studies that also show kefir has skin clearing properties. Now just to be clear, that means 1/3 of their spots or 1/3 of their zits disappeared just by drinking kefir. That kind of result is comparable to some standard topical acne treatments. Now I know what you're thinking, because if you have acne, you are pretty much trained to fear dairy. But here's the thing, the research does show that straight, unadulterated milk can be problematic for acne. But other research shows that fermented dairy, including kefir, can actually be really good for skin. And that's because the fermentation process gets rid of some of the hormone disrupting properties of normal milk. Now, for what it's worth, I have very acne prone skin and I don't do well with a lot of dairy, unfortunately, because it's delicious, but I can drink kefir without issue. Now, moving on to kefir and eczema. So another study gave people with healthy skin and people with atopic dermatitis or eczema kefir for 8 weeks. After drinking the kefir daily for 8 weeks, everyone's skin had a stronger skin barrier and everyone's skin was more hydrated, but the effects seemed more dramatic in the people who had eczema. And what's more, on average, the people who had eczema saw their eczema decrease from severe eczema to mild eczema, again, just from drinking kefir. Now, interestingly, a follow-up study showed that along with the skin improvements, people also had improvements in their digestion. Specifically, they had less constipation and less bloating. Now, this is significant because we know that people with skin conditions tend to have imbalanced gut bacteria and they're more prone to digestive symptoms. So it seems that by drinking kefir, the friendly bacteria in the kefir work on the gut, which has a positive effect on the skin. That leads me on to kefir and dry skin. So we have studies from both Portugal and Japan that were conducted in the autumn or fall and the winter, and the season is significant. That's because these studies showed that when people don't drink kefir, their skin generally gets drier as the weather gets colder. But when people do drink kefir, their skin maintains a good level of hydration even as the weather cools. That's probably because kefir contains hyaluronic acid, which is a key skin hydrator, and lots of other compounds like lactic acid that help to build up a strong skin barrier. It's kind of like a moisturizer that you take on the inside. Now, one of these studies used prebiotic fiber along with the kefir. We'll touch on that again in a little bit, just in case that's something you want to include with your kefir as well. If you're interested to learn more, I will link the studies below for you, but bear in mind that they're small and they are far from perfect, but there's certainly enough evidence here to warrant trying kefir. It's a pretty low risk intervention. So with that in mind, how do you make it? I'm going to talk you through this, and to begin with, it's going to seem like a massive faff. I promise you it's not. It's one of those things that once you get into the habit, it becomes an easy, effortless part of your day. Step 1 is to buy your grains. Now you're looking for the actual live grains, not a freeze-dried version. But such is the popularity of kefir that you can actually buy live kefir grains on Amazon, and you can get them in some health food stores too. So once you've got your grains, you're going to put them in a glass jar or a glass jug, and step 2 is you're going to add your milk. Now if you start off with about a teaspoon of kefir grains in your jar, you're going to need to add about a cup of milk. But be warned, kefir grains grow. Remember, they're alive. So they grow or multiply by about 3% with every fermentation. So in time, you're going to have more and more and more grains. And you know, it might be you selling kefir grains as a side hustle on Amazon. But anyway, I digress. Initially, you're going to have about a teaspoon of grains and you're going to add a cup of milk. Go for the best quality milk you can find. So grass-fed, organic, whole cow's milk would be ideal, but you know, just go with what you can. Now, if you don't want to use cow's dairy, you can use sheep's milk and you can use goat's milk, but you can't use nut milk just because it doesn't have everything the grains need to thrive. If you prefer to eat plant-based or you just don't want to have dairy, we'll talk a little bit about water kefir later on. So you've added your milk to the grains in a glass jar or a glass jug. Step 3 is to cover that jar or that jug with a muslin cloth. It can be a cheesecloth, just it can't be cling film because you will suffocate your grains. Remember, they are alive. They need to breathe. Step 4 is to leave this to ferment at room temperature for 12 to 24 hours. If where you live is warmer, it's going to ferment more quickly. Where I live in England, in the depth of winter, I have to leave it for about 2 days before it's ready. But generally speaking, about 24 hours or 1 day is the sweet spot. Make sure you keep it out of the sunlight and you'll know when it's ready because the solids and the liquids start to separate a little bit. Step 5 is to strain it. Give the mixture a gentle stir with a spoon and then strain it through a sieve. Now the liquid that you've strained is your kefir and it's ready to drink. All you need to do is just pop them back in the jar, cover them with milk again, and you're back to the beginning and you'll have more kefir in another 24 hours. If you want to break from kefir or you find you're making too much, all you need to do is just pop the grains in the fridge for a little bit. That kind of sends them to sleep so they stop fermenting, and when you're ready you can take them out and you're ready to go again. A few extra tips including how much to drink and how to find a good store-bought version. So most of the studies I mentioned use just 100 milliliters of kefir a day. That's less than half a cup, so you don't need much to see a good effect on your skin. As mentioned, you can also add prebiotic fiber to your kefir, and that makes a really powerful gut health drink. So the kefir already contains loads of friendly bacteria and yeast, and by adding prebiotic fiber you're also adding fuel for the good bacteria to really grow in your gut. Now my favourite prebiotic is galacto-oligosaccharides, which is GOS for short, and that's simply because GOS also has its own skin specific research behind it. Now GOS typically comes as a soluble powder in a jar or in sachets, and you can add that directly to the kefir and stir it in just before you drink it. Now, if you can't have dairy or you don't want dairy for whatever reason, you can make water kefir. Now, you need different grains for water kefir, and these don't look like cottage cheese, they look more like little crystals. And instead of using milk, you'll use water sweetened with sugar because it's the sugar that will feed the bacteria. Water kefir typically takes a little bit longer to ferment. It's an average of 2 days rather than 1, but otherwise it's more or less the same process. I have to say that for skin benefits, I do prefer dairy kefir, and that's because firstly, it just contains quite a lot more friendly bacteria and other skin supporting components. But number 2, we just have more research behind it, so we know that it works. Having said that, you know, do what works for you, and water kefir can be a great addition to your diet. Okay, so what do you do if you want to buy it? Even though making kefir is really easy and it's also really inexpensive, I know that sometimes you just want to buy it done, and that's fine. It is available in lots of grocery stores these days, and I have 3 tips to make sure you know you're getting a good one. Number 1, and this is very important, make sure the label says unpasteurized. If they pasteurize the kefir, they extend its shelf life, but they also kill off all the good bacteria and therefore most of the benefits. So make sure it says unpasteurized. Number 2, make sure it is actually kefir and not not just yogurt with a little bit of kefir added to it. Now, because kefir is so popular, manufacturers have jumped on the bandwagon and they're adding tiny bits of kefir to yogurt and calling it kefir. But this is nowhere near as powerful as the real thing. And number 3, if you have a local Eastern European supermarket, buy your kefir from there. That's because they have a long tradition of making kefir and it's usually really good quality. So to sum up, kefir can be fantastic for your skin. We have research showing that it can help acne and eczema, and it also can help to keep dry skin at bay. Making it is super easy to do at home, and you only need to drink about 100 milliliters a day or less than half a cup to see a skin benefit. If you do buy kefir from a shop, make sure you get one that's unpasteurized so you retain all the friendly bacteria and all of the benefit. Thank you for watching. I hope you found that interesting. If you did, you might like another video I've done on 5 drinks for glowing skin, which I'll link here. I hope to see you there. Otherwise, I will see you next time for another video on nutritional skincare.